Where they saw a girl, she saw possibility. Where they tried to define her limits, she chose to redefine herself. I wasn't born into certainty. I was born into questions. Questions about where I came from, what I could be, and how far a girl like me was allowed to dream. And everywhere I went, I was reminded, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, that expectations are placed on you long before you place them on yourself. But here is the truth I learned early. The world will always try to tell you who you are. Your real power begins the day you decide who you will become. I walked into rooms where I was underestimated. I crossed borders where I was unknown. I stepped into industries where I didn't look like the blueprint. And every single time I carried one belief with me. I don't need to fit into a system that was never built for me. I can build my own. Legacy is not about where you start. It's about how many times you stand back up when you are told to sit down. I failed. I was rejected. I was told no more times than I can count. But rejection didn't break me. It refined me. Because every no taught me discipline. Every doubt sharpened my focus. Every setback forced me to grow stronger, smarter, and more fearless. Understand this: confidence is not loud. Confidence is consistent. It's showing up when no one is clapping. It's working when no one is watching. It's believing when no one is betting on you. They saw a girl. But I knew I was a force shaped by culture, roots, and resilience, a force that didn't wait for validation, a force that learned that ambition doesn't make you difficult, it makes you unstoppable. And when success came, it wasn't just about winning for myself, because success means nothing if it doesn't open doors for others. Your legacy is not measured by trophies, titles, or headlines. It's measured by impact, by the voices you amplify, by the barriers you break so others don't have to fight the same battles. To every girl who has been told to be smaller, quieter, or more convenient, this is your reminder. Your dreams are not too big. The world is just too used to small expectations. Don't shrink to belong. Expand to lead. Don't wait for approval. Build your own authority. Don't chase perfection. Chase purpose. Because one day they will look back and realize they didn't just see a girl, they witnessed the beginning of a legacy. And that legacy starts the moment you decide, I am not here to be seen, I am here to be remembered. Where they saw a girl, she saw a future that had not yet been written, a future that did not ask for permission, did not wait for validation, and did not apologize for ambition. I was taught early that the world will try to define you before you understand yourself. It will hand you labels, limits, and expectations and expect you to live inside them quietly. But I learned that silence is not strength when it hides your truth. Strength is choosing your voice even when it shakes. I did not grow up believing the road would be easy. I grew up believing that effort mattered more than entitlement. I stepped into spaces where I was underestimated, sometimes ignored, sometimes judged before I spoke a word. They saw my age, my gender, my background, my accent. They saw a girl, but I carried something they could not see: hunger, discipline, and an unshakable belief that I could learn, adapt, and rise. Every rejection tried to teach me fear, but I chose to learn resilience instead. Every failure tried to convince me to stop, but I chose to start again, wiser and stronger. Reinvention became my survival skill. I learned that you are allowed to evolve, to outgrow versions of yourself, to change direction without guilt. Growth is not betrayal of who you were, it is respect for who you are becoming. Confidence did not arrive overnight. It was built in quiet moments, early mornings, lonely decisions, and uncomfortable risks. Confidence is not the absence of doubt. It is the courage to move forward despite it. I learned to sit at tables where I felt invisible and still speak with clarity. I learned to stand alone without shrinking. Because power is not about dominating a room, it is about owning your space in it. They told me to fit in, to follow the formula, to wait my turn. But legacy is not built by following paths already worn smooth. Legacy is built by those willing to walk where there is no map. I carried my culture with pride, my roots with gratitude, and my dreams without compromise. I refused to believe that success had only one language, one look, or one address. And when the doors finally opened, I understood something deeply important. Success is never just personal. It is responsibility. Responsibility to lift as you climb, to create room where there was none, to make the journey easier for those who come after you. A legacy is not what you achieve, it is what you change. To every girl watching, listening, hoping, know this. You do not need to be chosen to be powerful. You need to choose yourself. Do not wait to be seen. Be undeniable. Do not ask if you belong. Decide that you do. The world may see a girl, but you must see your destiny. Because when belief meets effort and courage meets consistency, a girl becomes a force. And a force, when driven by purpose, does not fade. She builds a legacy that speaks long after she has left the room. They looked at me and saw a girl standing at the beginning of a long road. What they did not see was the fire already burning inside me, the quiet determination shaped by discipline, sacrifice, and belief. I learned early that the world is comfortable with limiting women before they even discover their potential. It tells you how far you can go, how loud you can be, how much space you are allowed to take. But I decided that my life would not be guided by permission. It would be guided by purpose. Every step forward required courage. Courage to leave what was familiar. Courage to walk into rooms where my name meant nothing. Courage to be uncomfortable while learning, failing, and starting again. I understood that fear would always be present, but fear is not a stop sign. Fear is proof that you are standing at the edge of growth. So I walked forward anyway, carrying my doubts with me but never letting them lead. I was judged before I was understood, measured before I was known, and reduced to stereotypes that had nothing to do with my ability. But I refused to let anyone else's narrow vision become my reality. I focused on craft, on preparation, on showing up every day with excellence, even when the applause was missing, especially when the applause was missing, because consistency builds credibility long before recognition arrives. There were moments when the loneliness was heavy, when the road felt endless, when walking away would have been easier than staying. But I reminded myself that dreams demand endurance, they demand patience, they demand the strength to stand alone without becoming bitter. I learned to trust time, to trust the process, and most importantly, to trust myself. Power did not come from proving people wrong. It came from proving myself right, from knowing that I could survive uncertainty and still remain kind, still remain focused, still remain hungry. I learned that softness and strength are not opposites. A woman can be compassionate and commanding, graceful and relentless, ambitious and grounded. As success grew, so did responsibility, because success is not a finish line, it is a platform, and platforms are meant to be shared. I realized that every barrier I broke mattered beyond me, that representation is not about visibility alone, but about possibility. When one woman steps forward, she creates space for many more to follow. To those who feel unseen, unheard, or underestimated, remember this. You are not too much. Your dreams are not unrealistic. Your ambition is not arrogance. The world may try to make you smaller so it can feel more comfortable. Do not cooperate with that lie. They may see a girl standing quietly at the edge of the room, but inside her lives a vision that cannot be contained. And when that vision is fueled by courage, discipline, and belief, it becomes something greater than success. It becomes a legacy that speaks not just of achievement, but of change. They saw a girl stepping forward, and they assumed the story would be small, predictable, and temporary. But I understood something they didn't, that beginnings do not determine endings. I learned that labels are often placed on you by people who are afraid of your potential, not aware of it. From the very start, I chose to listen more closely to my inner voice than to the noise around me, because the loudest doubts are rarely the truest ones. I entered worlds where I was expected to adjust, soften, and blend in. I was encouraged to be grateful for space that was barely enough to stand in. But gratitude does not require surrender. Respect does not require silence. I decided that if I was going to walk into these spaces, I would do it fully, unapologetically, and with intention. I would learn relentlessly, work harder than expected, and prepare until opportunity had no choice but to notice me. Every challenge became a lesson in self-trust. When things didn't work out, I didn't interpret it as failure, I treated it as feedback. I refined my skills. I sharpened my instincts. I learned when to listen and when to lead. Reinvention was not an act of desperation, it was an act of courage. I refused to stay in places that no longer allowed me to grow, even when leaving meant uncertainty. Strength, I discovered, is not always visible. Sometimes it looks like patience, sometimes it looks like restraint, sometimes it looks like walking away with dignity instead of staying to be diminished. Real power is knowing your worth without needing constant validation. It is choosing long-term purpose over short-term approval. There were moments when I stood alone, carrying the weight of expectations that were not designed for me. I felt the pressure to represent, to succeed not just for myself, but for everyone who would come after. And instead of letting that pressure break me, I let it shape me. I turned responsibility into resolve. I turned scrutiny into focus. As my journey expanded, so did my understanding of success. Success is not simply achievement. It is influence with integrity. It is knowing that your presence can challenge old narratives and create new ones. It is using your voice not only when it benefits you, but when it benefits those who are still waiting to be heard. To every woman who has ever been underestimated, this is what I know to be true. You do not need to become harder to survive. You need to become clearer. Clear about your values, clear about your boundaries, clear about your vision. The world will test you, but it will also reveal you to yourself. They may have seen a girl at the start of the journey, but what they could not see was the strength being built in silence, the courage growing through adversity, and the legacy taking shape long before success had a name. They saw a girl and assumed the story would follow familiar rules, that she would stay within boundaries drawn long before she arrived, that her ambition would soften with time, that her voice would eventually quiet, that her dreams would learn to be reasonable. But I learned very early that the most dangerous thing you can do to yourself is to live according to someone else's comfort. So I chose discomfort. I chose growth. I chose to believe that my ceiling was not defined by their imagination. I carried uncertainty like a companion. Every new space reminded me that I did not belong by default. I had to earn my place. And instead of resenting that, I embraced it. Because preparation became my power. I learned my craft relentlessly. I showed up early, stayed late, listened deeply, and worked when quitting would have been easier. Discipline became my language when confidence was still forming. There were moments when I was told to wait, to be patient, to not ask for too much. But patience should never be confused with passivity. I learned that timing matters, but so does courage. Sometimes you have to speak before your voice is steady. Sometimes you have to step forward before you feel ready. Growth does not happen in comfort, it happens in motion. I learned to stand tall in rooms where I was questioned, and to remain grounded when I was celebrated. Both experiences test you. Criticism tries to shrink you and praise tries to distract you. Balance comes from knowing why you started in the first place. Purpose keeps you focused when opinions shift, when trends change, and when the spotlight moves on. Loneliness was part of the journey. Reinvention often is. Walking a new path means leaving behind familiar ground, familiar approval, and sometimes familiar people. But solitude taught me clarity. It taught me to listen to myself without the echo of expectations. In those quiet moments, I built resilience that applause could never give me. Power, I realized, is not control over others. It is control over yourself, over your reactions, over your integrity, over the standards you refuse to compromise. True power is choosing dignity when shortcuts are offered. It is choosing kindness without weakness. It is choosing excellence even when mediocrity is rewarded. As opportunities expanded, so did responsibility. Because visibility is not just a privilege, it is a duty. A duty to show that ambition and authenticity can coexist. A duty to challenge outdated narratives without losing compassion. A duty to make space, not just take it. Legacy is not about being first. It is about making sure you are not the last. They may have seen a girl at the beginning, unsure and untested. But what they could not see was the foundation being built beneath every step, the discipline, the courage, the refusal to settle. And when that foundation meets persistence, it creates something unshakable. Not just success, but a legacy strong enough to stand long after the doubts fall silent. They saw a girl and assumed the journey would be fragile, easily redirected, or quietly concluded. They believed the world would eventually teach her to adjust her dreams to fit reality. But I learned that reality is not fixed. It is shaped by those brave enough to challenge it. I decided that I would not wait for the world to make space for me. I would arrive fully, learn quickly, and claim my place with intention. From the beginning, I understood that confidence is built, not gifted. It grows through preparation, persistence, and the willingness to be uncomfortable. I walked into unfamiliar spaces, carrying more questions than answers, but I never doubted my right to be there. I listened, observed, and absorbed everything. And when it was time to speak, I spoke with clarity rooted in effort, not ego. There were days when progress felt invisible, when hard work did not translate into immediate results, when the temptation to slow down or settle felt heavy. But I reminded myself that consistency compounds, that what you do repeatedly matters more than what you do occasionally. Discipline carried me through moments when motivation disappeared, and purpose reminded me why quitting was never an option. I learned that resilience is not about never breaking. It is about refusing to stay broken. Failure taught me humility. Success taught me responsibility. Both demanded self-awareness. I stopped chasing approval and started building alignment between who I was and what I stood for. When you are aligned, criticism loses its power and validation becomes unnecessary. The world often mistakes ambition in women as aggression and strength as defiance. I chose not to correct those assumptions with apology. Instead, I corrected them with excellence. Excellence speaks a language that cannot be dismissed. It creates respect where doubt once lived. It shifts conversations without raising its voice. As my path widened, I became more aware of the impact of representation. Visibility changes perception. Possibility grows when people see themselves reflected in places they were once excluded from. I carried that awareness with care, knowing that every step forward carried meaning beyond personal success. Leadership is not about standing above others. It is about lighting the way forward. I learned to protect my values fiercely. Not every opportunity deserves your energy. Not every victory is worth the cost of your integrity. Legacy is built by the choices you make when no one is watching, when shortcuts are tempting, and when compromise feels convenient. Character outlives applause. They may have seen a girl standing at the edge of possibility, but what they could not see was the strength forming through patience, the vision sharpening through struggle, and the legacy taking shape through deliberate choices. Because when courage meets consistency and purpose guides ambition,